is another. I have a list of things called "What If," and I have a bunch of like scenarios. What if this and that? So this "What If" for this episode was actually inspired by something I listened to last week on the internet. It was from the Grill and Jr. podcast by Jim Ross, and they would talk about the episode was about Hulk Hogan's passing, and they went to the whole like hour and a half, 2 hours of a retrospective about Hogan, and they brought up on the show WrestleMania 18, and obviously WrestleMania 18 was The Rock and Hogan and that whole classic, and we know obviously one of the greatest moments in not just WrestleMania history but pro wrestling history, and the topic was broached about Stone Cold Steve Austin, and as to why that wasn't the match as opposed to The Rock against Hogan. Why wasn't Austin against Hogan? Now, back in the day, before I had a better understanding of the business and in real time, I always thought, why wasn't it Austin? Austin's the number one guy. Even in 2002, he was the number one guy. Why wasn't Austin against Hogan? And it to me, even though Hogan and Rock was fantastic, even in the moment I saw it was fantastic, it always right in my head like, why didn't Hogan and Austin do this match? Um, Jr. I wish I had the audio on this one, but Jr. basically said Austin didn't want to do it. He thought it was a bad fit. They thought their styles would clash, and I always thought that was weird. That was a weird assumption by Austin. But in hindsight, I kind of agree with them. I think we got the better match. I think if I don't think Austin Hogan has the same effect as Rock and Hogan do. Um, but having said that, Rob, the topic here is, what if Vince did pull the trigger and make it Hogan Austin at 18? Do we, in your opinion, have the same impact 23 years later?
I don't. No, I think what we got was for the better. Um, and because like Austin's demeanor as a character was not one to be, looking for the approval of the fans.
Yeah,
And whereas The Rock absolutely was, because he was always calling out to the millions and millions of The Rock's fans and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't hit the same if Austin comes out there and people boo him and they cheer Hogan. It doesn't quite hit the same, right? Because again, part of Rock's whole aura, his persona, and everything was reaching out to all of those people, and they all hang on his every word, and all that kind of stuff. And so that atmosphere, it doesn't hit the same because if they booed Austin, he just went out and you know it wouldn't have rattled him or whatever, right? As a character. Whereas them booing The Rock and cheering Hogan, right? That added to the mystique of that whole match. And then
you actually made a great point there. I'm gonna go ahead and finish. I'm gonna piggyback what you said.
because what people love about that match in hindsight was that reaction, the fact that even though he was Hollywood Hogan, for the WWE fans, he was back home, right? And that was something he never had in WCW because I've mentioned before, it'd been like if the Commanders
Hmm.
had and Troy Aikman to play quarterback, you accept it, but you don't like it, right? And that's kind of what he was in WCW. Is like
Right.
diehard WCW fans, they knew why they brought him in, but they really didn't like it, right? Because he was the symbol of the enemy, right? But to the WWE fans, their hero was coming back home, and they were not going to boo that man that night, right? They were not because this was something that they thought that they maybe would never get to see again, and
Yeah.
they got to see their big hero come back home, and they just were not going to boo him. And at WrestleMania and in Toronto, where he and the Warrior had the match at WrestleMania 6, and they thought they were never going to get to see that again, and they got to see it, so they were not going to boo him that night.
Right. And not only that, Austin is virtually the one guy in pro wrestling history that's untouchable. There's no way you get that same response. Like we can boo The Rock, even if he's a babyface, for one night because it's The Rock. Because The Rock has been a heel before. It makes sense. And The Rock can pull it off. Austin, while not a actual babyface in terms of the character, he was so well liked. It was an authentic character people love. Not because he was a good guy, a bad guy, because he was real. And I have a hard time seeing people wanting to boo Austin, even with the Hogan thing hanging right there. It wouldn't have made any sense. It would look awkward. Like you may get some people cheering Hogan over Austin, but I don't think you're going to get the same like 70-30, 80-20 that Hogan got. I think it'll be 50-50 at best because Austin still in 2002, while he was on his last legs and he was definitely frustrated with his staying in the company, he was still the most popular guy in the company without question, even with The Rock. So it
Yes,
wouldn't make any sense.
yes, and like the whole yeah, it wouldn't have, and it was just like again that reaction to both of them in that match. Because I mean, if you're one of those, if you're going to do the whole thing where you count how many moves people do and all of that, I mean, it was as a pure work rate match, it was fine, but the atmosphere and the energy and and then them switching up how they were working because that's the other thing. I mean, they flipped their working styles on the fly because of the crowd reaction,
Yep.
and that is something like you rarely see that, and because because I've listened to wrestlers talk about doing it, and actually I saw it. I actually seen it at a house show I went to. I saw it happen once. I saw like the Usos against the War Raiders, and that crowd was not booing the Usos that night. So and so they just completely flipped. They flipped how they were working. But this wasn't at some house show. This was at WrestleMania,
Yeah.
and for them to have to, I mean, they did that on the fly at WrestleMania.
Right.
It was not scripted. It was not planned. And for them to do that, on that stage in that atmosphere, I mean, that's a testament to how good both of those guys were as workers.
The great pros, man. I mean,
Yeah, and
I look like 20 years ago. I could understand why Hogan and Austin could have worked, and maybe it would have had, maybe the match would be decent. Maybe we're being a little too, you know, critical, and maybe it would be a good match, but it would have nowhere near the same impact that Rock Austin has to this day.
also, I mean, Rock and Hogan, their styles, like, Austin was just kind of would come in there and just go 90 miles an hour, just punching and kicking away at you.
Yeah,
The way Hogan and Rock worked with the pauses to let the crowd breathe and to take in the crowd. I mean, because they both worked that way, where you do something and then you pause and you let the crowd react and you let the kind of the wave wash over you, and then you go to the next thing, right? That
exactly.
Austin didn't work that way. Austin was just all gas. To quote Jacob Fatu, all gas and no brakes,
Yes, he
and
was.
it didn't lend itself. So that was that wouldn't have lend itself to that type of atmosphere. Like they would have just done the match, but the way The Rock and Hogan work, where again you do stuff and then you stop and you let the crowd react and then you listen to the crowd and then you do the next thing, right? That lent that lent itself to that atmosphere, and and then that just added to everything, right? So I think what we got was for the better. I don't think. I mean, yeah, I mean, and at that point, Hogan, keeping up with some type of rapid fire offense like Austin did, it probably wouldn't have been great, you know.
No,
Um,
no, not at all.
so yeah, I think what we got was for the better. Um, yeah, now that Austin, I think if they could have gotten Austin and Goldberg together, that would have been better than Austin and Hogan, I think, because you could have done a 10-minute match with Austin and Goldberg.
I ran my head and really tried to see that Goldberg Austin thing. I just don't know if that will work. And not even because of Austin, it's Goldberg.
Well, because I mean, it's. I think it would have worked better because Austin could have hit the ring and went after him and does his punching and stomping and all of that for a few minutes,
Which
and then
it would have been better than what you said than um Hogan Austin, which
yeah,
I actually might agree with you on that.
because I mean, Austin could have gone into his routine, and then you do that for a few minutes, and then Goldberg, of course, after a few minutes of taking it, he shrugs it off and and fires up and all of that. I mean, you could have
2000,
got
but Rob, 2002 is so weird though because like your two top guys really technically are still Rock and Austin, but
yeah,
not really at the top of the card when it came to the title. Because at that point, Triple H was a champion at that time, I think, right? Him and Jericho going at it for the title that
yeah,
night. Austin and Rock were not bound for the title. I mean, Rock will get the title back that summer and then losing to Brock Lesnar in
yeah,
SummerSlam. But Austin would never see the title again. Austin
yeah.
was not after 2001. Austin was never a champion again.
Yeah, and it's so I don't know if they were like actively trying to move on or if they just kind of run out of ideas. It would seem like a little bit of both. Like, it seemed like yeah, it just seemed like a little bit of both. Like, because Austin's physical health was just deteriorating
Yeah,
and you just didn't know how long you were going to have him. And then, Rock was very serious about doing the movie thing and you didn't know how long you were going to have him either. Right? Or how often, how frequently you would have him. So, I mean, so on the one hand, so it made sense for them to start thinking about moving forward, and then at the same time, it also felt like they kind of ran out of ideas. Um, so it seemed like a little bit of both, and they just didn't really have anything figured out for either of them.
right. Like I feel like The Rock got backed into Hogan, not backed in, but I felt like because remember everything happened kind of so swiftly early that year, where like some of those WCW guys ended up a year after the initial you know you know company going under or being bought rather by Vince, and some of those guys who were sitting out on the contracts end up coming in out of nowhere, and then like let's try this idea and let's throw Rock and Hogan, so Rock got the benefit of doing that. Austin got Scott Hall, which obviously that match was not, I thought it was okay, but their hearts were not into it. Hall was having issues, obviously outside the ring. Um, it's one of those things where like people say, like I said, if you asked me in 2002, we should have got Hogan. But in hindsight, I'm glad we didn't get that. And in hindsight, I'm so glad we didn't get that because I'm thinking in my head now with a much more of a broadened wrestling intellect, you will, and look at the business differently now as a business and as a this broad chemistry wise. All Hogan and Rock was much better chemistry than Austin Rock. And remember, they wrestled again a year later, and Rock was the actual heel, and it was still a good match.
Yeah,
So they made the right call there. They made the right call there.
yeah.
Who do you think benefited more from that whole Austin Rock Hogan match though? In hindsight,
Oh, Hogan did because um, he won the title after that. Right? I mean, he got another title reign after that because basically because of the reaction he got in that match. It and so it kind of gave him one final. I mean, I know he came back again in 2005, but that match, yeah, it breathed some more life into his career. Um, because otherwise, like if that match hadn't gone well, then people would have just been saying, "Okay, old man, time to retire." You know.
yeah.
Uh, so I think it
Hmm?
it breathed new life into his career one last time.
Yeah.
And No, I
You
think
get
as
another,
far,
you get another 3 years of Hulkamania. You get another 3 years of Hulkamania.
yeah, yeah, and then now as far as The Rock, now I think what The Rock did get out of that was that for people, for people who thought that he couldn't work, right? That was a testament to how good he was at working, that he was able to, they were able to flip the way they were working that match on the fly. I mean, that's the testament to him and how good of a worker he is. Even though, no, he was never a work rate wrestler, but um, that was a testament to how good of a worker he was.
It also opened the door in a small way, but opened the door for his next heel run because even though the booze he got wasn't "Oh, we hate you, Rock" booze. It was more so, "Well, we love you, Rock, but Hogan's our guy first. We love you, but Hogan's our guy." It wasn't necessarily "We don't like you, Rock" booze, but what it did do is open the door because by the time we get to SummerSlam a few months later, he's getting real booze. Brock's the guy, and there was some booze at the end of that match towards the Rock. And I don't know if you remember this in the documentary. You probably don't see this at SummerSlam on the actual match, but in the documentary, the Hollywood Rock documentary that came out for the Ruthless Aggression, set that came out a couple years ago, he did have some comments to the crowd after leaving. He spoke to the crowd at the end of the match and kind of gave him the business. Um, and there was some mixed reaction, and that was the first massive seed to when he came back a few months later. Remember, he went to do the movies after that. Came back in January, and then people were pissed at him for obviously doing the Hollywood thing. And the next time you see The Rock, he's a heel. So you can argue that match also set the tone for what we'll see 9 months later, him turning heel. Even though that probably wasn't the plan initially, but there was some people. I think people were a little burnt down The Rock also too by 2002. A little bit on the babyface Rock. I know I was.
Yeah, because I mean, I think so, and it's just
Yeah.
no, I mean, I was surprised that he got booed like that against Brock Lesnar, but still, yeah, I think again, I'm not sure as to why people were tired of him, but I mean, by that summer, there definitely some people weren't, and it may have just been that they were excited for for this new guy Brock Lesnar, right?
It's also
Um,
him with movies too, also not being committed to WWE at that point. He was starting to become part time. He had one foot out,
yeah,
which is natural.
yeah, and then I think that people and we knew, right, and then so that's the thing. It's like, yeah, if you're going to do that, then again, well, once we know that you don't really want to be around, we do kind of take offense to that, so I think that probably was part of it, and then also I think some people were just, because Brock Lesnar was this phenomenon back then, and I think people just wanted to get on the train, right, and see where it was going to go.
Yeah, and plus, me personally, I prefer heel. I'll always say this though. I'll always prefer heel Rock over babyface Rock, and by
Um,
and by, and by a wide margin. To be honest with you, if you're being real.
yeah, because I think, um, yeah, I mean, I think he is a better character as a heel. Because we saw that with the final boss.
Hmm.
Um, but people started, I mean, there's a limit to which people are going to boo him, and so it's just, yeah, it's hard to keep him a heel for
Yes.
long because he's just so damn entertaining, even as a heel. Which is, I mean, and one of the reasons why the WrestleMania 40 thing, worked last year, the final boss, was that it wasn't long. It was, it started it started after Royal Rumble, and then, we saw him on Raw after WrestleMania 40, and then we didn't see him again, right?
Yeah.
So he last year he got out before people was like, cheering the final boss character. He didn't stick around long enough for that to kind of take root. So, but I think he is better as a heel, yes. But it's just we're in that world now where, well, and actually, I mean, it's if you're charismatic enough and all of that, then people want to cheer you. Like, I mean, even like Roddy Piper, it got to a point where even they turned him babyface because they just weren't going to be able to keep it going that long. Is I mean, even though and look, he was and Piper did all types of line stepping, line crossing things as a heel to get booed, and but I think they knew even then, even with that, it was going to be they weren't going to be able to keep it up forever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I think in hindsight they did the right thing.
Yeah,
Austin and Hogan would not have worked. I don't think Austin would have worked on any form. To be honest with you, let's be real.
yeah.
There's just that.